Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another video of the History of Fashion and Costume Design series. My name is Bridget, and today we are going over privateer and pirate fashion and dress in the 18th century. And most people are familiar with the Hollywood image of the swashbuckling pirate and privateer dressed in a loose-fitting flowing shirt, gold jewelry, a head bandana, a sash, a sword, trousers. But by the time modern film and media came to reflect on the subject of the pirate, the reality of life at sea from the late 16th to early 19th century had long passed from human memory. Some of the earliest depictions of seaman's dress appears to date from a few years after the Roman invasion of Britain in 55 BC, with an order that the sails of longboats in the Roman fleet were to be dyed this light blue to match the color of the sea, and that their crew were to wear the clothing of the same color to lessen the chances of boats being seen by an enemy or hit by archers. Seafaring crews for King Edward the Confessor, reigning from 1042 to 1066, wore blue tunics, and during the Norman invasion of Britain in 1066, blue was a common color amongst ship members. And here I have the Bayeux tapestry from the 11th century depicting the Norman invasion, and you can see these sailors wearing the blue tunics. Generally, sailors' clothes were completely practical, except for the outfits they donned for going ashore. These clothes were either supplied by the ship or made from raw materials that the men purchased on board. In privateer and pirate ships, clothing and material seized from captured prisoners and cargo was important booty. A passenger who sailed aboard a vessel seized by Edward Lowe submitted an advertisement to the Boston Newsletter, published in the 18 to 25 June 1722 issue, that listed a variety of garments the pirates took, as in the following: one scarlet suit of clothes, one new gray broadcloth coat, one sword with a fine red velvet belt, 9 bags of coat and jacket buttons, a considerable quantity of sewing silk and mohair, shoe buckles, one scarf of red Persian silk fringed with black silk, one beaver hat bound with silver lace. And it appears that stripes have also been long associated with mariners, and by the middle of the 1600s, sailors appearing in English and Dutch paintings wear red and white or blue and white in horizontally striped shirts. And here we have this modern rendition depicting the late 16th century English sailor, and he's wearing some of these items that were depicted in the Boston Newsletter. Mariners were dressed from the slop's chest, and the term slops comes from the Old English word slop or slipe, referring to a loose garment such as a smock, baggy trousers, or another type of breeches. And the word slopper was also used by the Vikings and has a similar meaning. It later developed into a sort of unofficial uniform when the original clothing in which men joined their ships wore out. It was for economic reasons that the clothes tended to be in the same pattern and color. And while it was often a matter of debate, it appears that these short slops or sailor shorts did not commonly appear until the mid 17th century and were not commonplace until the early 18th century, a variant of which is the petticoat breech or skilt, which is a voluminously wide pleated loose skirt that is generally made from canvas or old sailcloth and originally meant to keep tar off of a good man's clothing or otherwise protect it from damage. They were usually worn over breeches, but sometimes worn with nothing underneath. And by the mid 18th century, with the dress code of 1748 coming into effect, the Royal Navy regulations stipulated that slops were generally only worn by common ratings, for example, a sailor or a cabin boy, a cook, or a carpenter. The officers of the crew from the rank of midshipman or bachelor wore knee breeches. And the typical male dress of this period comprised a hat, a linen shirt, a jerkin, breeches, hose, and shoes. And all of these have been recovered, and the most prevalent foot coverings either were slip-on shoes or ankle boots made of leather. Some jerkins had buttons for closures, while others had holes for lacing, although the laces did not survive. And most mariners were accomplished sewers, a skill from mending sails, and they could mend and craft garments and embellish shirts with embroidery. And this gives the earliest date of about 1380 for this knee-length gown, possibly the forerunner of the English seamen's petticoat trousers, which remained an article standard dress until the beginning of the 19th century. There was a good functional reason for the longevity of this odd piece of maritime clothing and the protection it offered to the trousers of men working aloft, or also when they were rowing the boats, because the petticoat protected against the rain and spray. And as time passed, the shipman's gown became a canvas frock tucked into breeches or trousers to then become a blouse. And here I have some images. This one is depicting the Royal Navy dress code, and you can see this gentleman in the back wearing these knee breeches. On the right, we have a depiction of a cabin boy wearing slops. Petticoat breeches are wide-kneed breeches. And then I also found this coin, and this coin is depicting a true-hearted sailor from 1794 wearing full-length trousers. And next, so the late 16th and early 17th century seamen wearing very baggy breeches. They were wearing very baggy breeches with woolen stockings, a thigh-length blouse or coat, and a tall, hairy hat. Although one or two of the Dutch sea atlases show some of the seamen wearing long, baggy trousers under an ankle-length coat. And we have the Venetian breeches, or simply Venetians, common with sailors from the 16th to 18th centuries, and these were typically like gartered at the knees with ties or belting, and later variations were buttoned and became commonly referred to as the knee breeches. We have Pirate Bartholomew with his knee breeches from 1721. We have a ship captain wearing the Venetian breeches or knee breeches from 1743. And then we have a Dutch sailor with these knee breeches from 1790. So we have the two types that are right here, which is fun. And here's some more breeches because you just can't get enough. So we have a French engraving of Captain Conyngham from 1777, and he was known as the Dunkirk Pirate. He was an Irish-born American merchant sea captain and an officer of the Continental Navy and a privateer, and he's been referred to as the most successful of all Continental Navy captains. Second image in is a typical 18th century seaman wearing petticoat breeches. The third in, we have a group of sailors with slops, known sometimes as these wide-kneed breeches. And then we also have this extant original of short slops or wide-kneed breeches, and this is at the London Museum, and this is from 1600. All right, and moving on to shirts. The sailor shirt likely developed from the Roman tunica, originally a shapeless canvas bag-like garment with just a hole for the head and two holes for the arms. This shirt was viewed as an undergarment, so it was usually worn under a tunic, cloak, doublet, jerkin, or another form of outerwear. The seaman's shirt would be loose fitting and flowing, and like this would so it would not constrict movement. And colors became more typical mid 16th century onward as a fashion statement known as a ruff. However, as a sailor on sea, the ruff was too much in the way of maintenance, so the collar would rather be flat or replaced with a handkerchief tied around the neck. Here we have the cravat, and the macaronis reintroduced the flowing cravat in the 1770s, and the manner of a man's nodding became indicative of his taste and style to the extent after the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, the cravat itself was referred to as a tie. And we have an example of a cravat here, and then the Continental Navy from 1776 to 1777. You can see the midshipman, the captain, and the seaman. And the seaman's in the back with the handkerchief or the cravat. We have the Neckwear, an essential component of upper class male fashion in the Baroque period. And you can actually see this in Pirates of the Caribbean, a lot of ways at the neck with a brooch or a sewn on neckband. And here I have a variety of hats and headwear. Very interesting how much we have. Skull caps were the most basic piece of medieval headwear, and it was made up of 8 to 10 pieces of leather sewn together and secured by lappets at the chin. Spanish hats, which is here where my mouse is, had more of like a flat top appearance, typically made of felt or a heavy cloth. And the Monmouth cap was similar to the skull cap. Depicted here, yet it was knitted from a brown wool, and these hats were actually mentioned by Shakespeare in his play Henry V in Act 4, Scene 7. The tricorn hat directed rainwater off of one's face from the triangular folds, and this became very popularized in 1667. And the tricorn then declined in popularity in the 18th century, evolving into the bicorn hat. And this hat was primarily worn by European and American naval soldiers, and this is also known as the Napoleon hat. So we have Captain John Paul Jones wearing the bicorn hat from the U.S. Continental Navy from 1776. Then we have an example here on a mannequin. And coming to the main topic, the main question is eye patches. And while there's no documented factual evidence of pirates wearing eye patches, stories passed down and translated over time have stated pirates did not primarily wear eye patches to look badass or intimidating or because they lost an eye, but rather because it helped them maintain healthy eyesight and would be effective for night vision when moving between the decks of the ship. So, for instance, if the eye patch is worn on the right eye on the main deck, the pirate would then move the eye patch over to the left eye when he's in the lower deck, as the right eye would then be accustomed to like darkness for like this night vision and being able to see clearly in the dark, which is very clever. So we have some sketches, etchings over here of two sailors with an eye patch, but these sailors seem very injured. And then we have one on the right that's wearing that traditional eye patch that we see in like Hollywood films. And we have shoes. And most sailors, pirates, privateers, they worked barefoot for this extra grip on ropes while aloft. However, when wearing footwear, it would be common to have on or wear leather shoes. So I have these British leather shoes from the 18th century on the right-hand side. And in the 1780s, the following shoes were worn with breeches. We have the top boot, also known as the jockey or jemmy boot, which was this soft black leather turned down in a deep fitting cuff to the top to display the light brown leather lining. And then in the 1790s, the Hessian boot, also known as the Hussar boot in France, became fashionable. And this was taken from a style worn by troops of Hesse in Germany. And it was this hard black polished leather and had a tassel hanging from the top in front. And this is my works cited for this presentation. I wish I could find a lot more readings and books about this. However, a lot of pirate fashion is very Hollywood and very fantasized. So there isn't a lot of historical documentation that we have of pirates, but rather we have a lot on sailors. So I hope you enjoyed. I am very open to answering any questions or if you have any comments, concerns, all of that jazz. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.